Hey everybody, Luke Gordon, and I wanted to make one more video about FCEs or functional capacity evaluations, and this will probably round out my series about them. So I've got some other videos that talk about just what they are, how to prepare for them, some of the frequently asked questions that you might run into, and one of the ones that I think is the most important or most commonly asked question is, that I used to get from clients, is should I work through my pain? And it's a really tricky question to answer, and so I just wanted to give you some different points of view and some advice on how to answer that. That way, if you are approaching your FCE, or you might call it a PCE in your area, that you kind of know what's expected of you. So again, if you're getting to the point where you're having an FCE, more than likely you've had a workplace injury for quite a while, and now you're still dealing with some level of restriction in terms of like your movement, your strength, your physical abilities with like reaching, lifting, carrying, using your hands repetitively, whatever it may be. So more than likely, when they put you through this test, which is oftentimes a 4-hour test or maybe even a 6-hour test, you're going to be working with pain. So the question is really how much pain is reasonable, and should you keep pushing it? Because you get some people who just, they can push through pain, especially if it's just for one day. But unfortunately, the next day those people are going to feel horrible, and then they're not going to be able to do, as many things that next day, maybe even for a few days. So you really don't want to do that. And that's on one end of the spectrum, let's say. That's one extreme, the person who will just push through. If you tell them to lift as much as they can, they'll overdo it. So that's, let's say, one end of the spectrum or one end of that bell-shaped curve. Whereas on the other end, you get someone who says, well, if it hurts, I won't do it. And, I can't lift my arm at all, period, because it hurts every time I do. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum, to the extremes there. And basically what I would say is you really don't want to be on either end. You want to be somewhere in the middle, knowing that if you have an injury that's been bothering you for a long time, you've got some residual, limitations with your strength, your range of motion, things like that, that some pain is probably going to be necessary. You're kind of in a chronic pain stage, unfortunately. So somewhere in the middle is where you want to be. And I know that's pretty vague right now, so let me try to give you some more advice in terms of how else to kind of work through it. So again, you don't want to be on either ends of the extreme. You don't want to push too hard, and you don't want to just refuse to do the testing, because what happens then is that your FCE rater, which is usually a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, is going to start labeling you like non-compliant or a malingerer or things like that. So anyhow, you don't really want that. It doesn't help you and it doesn't help them. Doesn't help your case move forward. So as you're going through the test, then you want to get kind of a good communication going with your FCE examiner, and just kind of start asking them these questions too. So I think my best advice then is early in the test as possible, start to build some rapport with your FCE examiner. Don't overdo it when they ask you certain questions, which I've talked about in other videos as well. But if they're asking you simple questions about your history and your level of pain and restrictions and things like that, try to just give them objective, to the point answers. Because if you start getting too many details or kind of wishy-washy, or you start throwing in a lot of emotional backstory, it's going to throw them off, and it's going to start to make them start looking at you differently. So that's really my best advice for how to work through pain during your FCE, is be very upfront with your FCE examiner, be to the point when they ask you questions, and then start to work with them and say, well, this is what really bothers me, this is when I have increased pain, and start getting their opinion on how much pain you should be experiencing or what you should be working through. That way you kind of shift some of that responsibility onto them, and you say, well, they have the medical background, they have the experience, and they should have all the details with your medical history. So what type of injury you had, what structures are involved, what treatments you've done, if you've had surgeries, rehab processes, pain clinics, all those things. So in order for your FCE examiner to have the real full picture of what it is that you're going through and what you're dealing with, you've got to be able to give them your medical history succinctly, promptly, without taking them off into too many directions, where again, I think as an FCE examiner myself, you can get confused that way. So that's my biggest advice for how much pain should you work through. It's somewhere in the middle there, and really try to get that relationship and the communication going with your FCE examiner, that PT or OT, so that you feel like you're gaining a little bit of their trust and they're gaining some of your trust, so you guys can kind of work together. If you can get to that I guess, kind of relationship or stage with your FCE, I think you'll have a much easier time figuring out how much pain you can work through. So I hope that helps. Before you go, if you want to leave a comment, if you have any other advice, if you've been through an FCE, or if you have any other advice on how to properly work through pain, please leave that below. I'm sure the other people watching the video would appreciate any comments you have if you've been through an FCE before, or you're just nervous and have questions. So go ahead and leave that comment before you go, and I hope this helps, and I really hope that your FCE goes well, and that, again, you don't fall on either end of that spectrum, you don't push too hard, and you don't just sit there and refuse to do anything, because either of those situations is not good for anybody. So again, I hope it goes well, and I hope that video helped. Thank you for watching.